Hi there. We are under 2 weeks now from the premiere of House of the Dragon Season 2. So HBO just updated its webpage of official character descriptions to include a lot of the new people who will be joining next season. And I'm not going to go through all of them because most of them are what you'd expect, but 4 were notable to me for making slight changes from the books. I'll go over those, though. I'll tell you right now, it was nothing that ruined it for me. It's just it's slightly different the way they're playing it. I'm fine with that as a reasonable fan, that normal adaptations move things slightly. I'm fine. And these are all 4 people who we knew were cast. It's just how they're playing the character. To start with, and this is by far the biggest one, Racallio Rindoon. Racallio Rindoon, the infamous, flamboyant, larger-than-life pirate from the books, who we didn't even know if they'd be in this season, that Laenor does mention that character, but not by name, in Season 1, Episode 6, when he says, the Triarchy's new admiral is this really flamboyant, larger-than-life warrior who charges into battle wearing women's frocks and dyes his beard purple. How do I even begin to describe Racallio Rindoon? It's this madman, but a genius. And eventually becomes a pirate because they hire pirates to be their admirals and stuff. And he is a major recurring character in the books, but mostly in the Regency era. They mention he was active in the Stepstones during this point. Becomes a major figure by, if they keep going in order, this would be like Season 6. Because I think if they go into the Regency era, it would be like Season 6-ish. I didn't know if they'd actually have the character this early, but that's fine. It's setting them up more as a major recurring character. Well, I said these are all people who we already knew were cast. Racallio Rindoon will be played by Abigail Thorne, who is a professional actress, but is also a YouTuber who runs the major channel Philosophy Tube. I've just got this dog and pony show here. This is an amateur thing. That's like one of those real professional YouTube channels. She's also done movies and things, is an actor. And we knew Abigail Thorne was in House of the Dragon from not too subtle social media posts. The real question for like a year now is, well, who is she playing? And some thought, they're going to drastically change one thing or another. And I kept saying maybe it's a mercenary from the Free Cities, because they had different views on gender and stuff, that Abigail Thorne is a trans woman. And actually, yeah, it makes a lot of sense to cast a trans woman as Racallio Rindoon, who is infamously this larger-than-life, flamboyant, cross-dressing pirate who, it says, likes to dress up as a woman and a female prostitute and have sex with men at the docks, and is just this utterly not socially conforming, chaotic, really cool character. Just someone who's going to out Jack Sparrow, basically. That, yeah, this is this gender non-conforming, cross-dressing person. They don't have a term for transgender, but as medieval history shows us, like, there have always been, like, transgender people. I mean, they were not having a good time. They had miserable lives at the margins of society as sex workers for survival sex work. But there are medieval records of there's Elizabeth Riker was this what we would call a trans woman, but it was a man living as a woman in medieval times. That's a thing, and the culture of the Free Cities is very different from Westeros, and on top of that, Racallio's kind of crazy, even compared, out there, outlandish, not conforming to social conventions, even compared to the Free Cities. As the thing I think some people were upset about is, even I did this, in like fan art and stuff, we all kind of mentally pictured Racallio Rindoon as played by Taika Waititi. From Our Flag Means Death, and there's even like fan art of like subbing it and everything of hard subtitles. And here's Racallio Rindoon and his crew of fancy men, and we thought they'd rehire the cast from Our Flag Means Death to play Racallio's crew. So I'm fine with that, and just in terms of, yeah, it makes sense to cast a transgender actor to play this, what we would call a transgender character in the book, in the source material. It reminds me of, like, if people are going to give us business about this, morons who hadn't actually read Sandman by Neil Gaiman, when the show, season 1 came out, which is a very good adaptation, had knee-jerk reactions that they cast a trans actor, Mason, to play Desire of the seven endless, who are the embodiments of things like death or dreaming or desire. That they cast a trans actor to play Desire when Neil was like, "Have you morons even read my comic in which Desire is literally presented as a hermaphrodite?" Because it's the embodiment of a concept, it's both male and female. It's not a physical thing. They're shapeshifted gods, basically. You're complaining that we cast a gender non-conforming person to be Desire. So I'm actually completely fine with this. That makes sense for Racallio Rendoon. The one caveat which I am mildly annoyed about is they have renamed Racallio. That basically they merged two admirals of the Triarchy together. Racallio Rendoon, who's working for the Triarchy at this point, and Sharako Lohar, who in the book it says is the fleet commander, the admiral of the fleet that the Triarchy sends to help the Greens fight Rhaenyra. Racallio's around, but just not in command of that specific fleet. They have more than one admiral. What I think they did was they said first, Sharako Lohar is not a character in the books. Mentioned 4 times. Literally the only description is the fleet's admiral, who is named Sharako Lohar. Has no physical description and no personality. And other than the fact that it once uses the male pronoun he, we have no idea what this character was like. So we're not losing Sharako Lohar of the books. There was nothing to lose. What I think they did was they said, hey, Sharako's such a not character in the book. Can we give that role to Racallio Rendoon? Work in Racallio Rendoon earlier by giving him what Sharako was doing, by putting Racallio in command of the Green's fleet during the Dance of the Dragons, which is a good idea. I wish I had suggested that. I didn't think they'd actually Racallio so larger than life. I thought, would they be actually willing to do that? Yeah, we're willing to work in Racallio more. But they basically said, oh, let's give Racallio stuff that Sharako did. And while we're at it, I guess we should call this new merged character Sharako Lohar. That doesn't make sense to me. That if you're merging the major character Racallio Rendoon with a minor character named Sharako Lohar, the resulting TV character you call Racallio Rendoon. So I don't understand why they did. Now, Abigail Thorne put out videos revealing, I've been sitting on this, but I actually have joined the cast of House of the Dragon. I play Sharako Lohar, and she uses female pronouns. She is... Book Racallio, I imagine, would be shifting between pronouns all the time. Racallio Rendoon of the books defies categorization on any level. He loved kittens but hated cats. He stole money but gave it away to beggars. He was well educated, but he had the mouth of a stable boy and was a thug. You cannot categorize. How do I even begin to describe Racallio Rendoon? As I've said time and again. But she said in her video, if you've read the books, you know what a cool character Sharako is, so chaotic. And I'm like, okay, you are clearly playing Racallio Rendoon, renamed as Sharako Lohar, because Lohar is not an interesting character. Lohar is nobody. So it's too late to complain now that why did you use the other name when you merged this with a minor character? You used the name of the minor character. And I don't have a problem with that, because she's talked about, I made the role my own, I worked out a lot of this with the writers, which is always good, so they're all communicating. And I'm happy to have, I would say, can you work in Racallio Rendoon earlier? It's just, why did you change it to a different name? And part of me is wondering, did the marketing boys think it sounds too much like Rocket Raccoon, because it's also alliterative? Or did Thorne just go, I kind of like the name Sharako more, because it rolls off the Sharako. I don't, that's the first thing and only question I'd ask really is, well, why don't you just call them Racallio? You're clearly playing an analog to Racallio. And the comparison I draw is, going back to Sandman, if you cast someone cast like Mason, cast a trans person to play Desire, and then renamed the character Lust, And I'd say, this TV character doesn't make sense. Oh, you're upset about the casting? No, I'm like, this character's name is Desire. It's their names are alliterative. Destiny, Dream, Death, Desire. Why is your TV version called Lust? That makes no sense. It has nothing to do with who they cast. It's just, well, Racallio Rindoon is cool. It's alliterative, like a superhero name. So, Rose by any other name and all of that, okay, we are getting Racallio Rindoon, who for some reason or another they've renamed Scirocco. I have no idea why, and I was mildly upset because, okay, well, in the book, Scirocco dies in a battle. But given that this is Racallio just with doing certain things Scirocco did, and the death of Scirocco isn't really a plot, that's no guarantee that TV Racallio, played by Abigail Thorne, won't necessarily die. Just because the character's named Scirocco. Like, how many times did Game of Thrones move around character beats? I'm talking like season 1, when it was like little things with what different Khos in Khal Drogo's army that they changed the names, swapped them around a little. Didn't really change things that much, as early as season 1 at least. So the fact that the character's named Scirocco doesn't necessarily mean this character will die, because this should be a recurring job security for Abigail Thorne. This Racallio would be a major character through season 6 or 7. In fact, okay, Racallio, we never even find out how they die in the book. It just says eventually lived out their days as a pirate captain in the Basilisk Isles after the war in the Free Cities petered out. So this character could be around for a while. It's just, why did you use the less well-known name for... There is a fandom for Racallio Rindoon just from the books. Why would you rename that? That makes no sense to me. But otherwise, it makes a lot of sense. They have, let's cast a trans character to play what is clearly a gender-fluid, not-conforming character. My other thing, of course, was that, well, they describe... even in season 1, they said this character is very tall. And Abigail Thorne is 6'1", but I'm like, you can't just cast a 6'3" actor to, let's say, play Duncan the Tall, who is infamously 7 feet tall in the books. And yeah, they'll have a box to stand on. They'll have a box. But I'd rather they hire someone who can actually act. That Abigail Thorne has a prior history of being a real professional actor and has fight choreography experience and stuff. So I'm fine with all this. Just, it's annoying when they rename characters, because can you give us a reason why you renamed this character? It's the flippancy of when Benioff and Weiss would rename characters, and it's like, is this just because I said so at whim? Or if they said, because the marketing boys said Racallio Rindoon would be confused with other things. Okay. Just why Scirocco? The other guy. The other 3 things in this are actually pretty straightforward in terms of there's slight changes from the books in terms of 3 other things that we already know were cast. Hugh Hammer, Oscar Tully, and the brothel madam from season 1, played by Michelle Bernard, who is actually a well-known acting coach. In terms of Hugh Hammer, who is going to be one of the Dragon Seeds, he actually has a wife and daughter in the TV show. That it says he's this blacksmith who is struggling to make ends meet to provide for his wife and sickly daughter, who I imagine I'm guessing, will end up being killed in food riots or something, so he feels bad about it. That, again, Fire and Blood is an outline, and it says we don't know much about Hugh Hammer's backstory, other than that he was a blacksmith. And they apparently wanted to round it out to make him, I wouldn't say a more sympathetic character, but the start of darkness of this is how he went from being a relatively... that give him some trauma. That's why would a person suddenly be as brutal as he is? Well, something bad happened to them. Okay, you wanted to work in why is he this angry about everything. So we'll see how they play that. I mean, good on paper, might not be good in execution. Maybe the dialogue is clunky anytime you have to invent something. But on paper, that we wanted to round out who this guy was because there isn't that much description in the book, fine, give him a life. Next, some minor condensation for Oscar Tully and the dance prequel era Tullys in general. You see, look at the family tree here. In the book, the current lord of Riverrun, who was on his deathbed for a couple of years, he's just old and dying man, is old Lord Grover Tully. And we don't know the name of his son. His son is unnamed and apparently died before the war began, because eventually when he does die, he is directly succeeded by his grandson, Elmo Tully. And Elmo's two sons are Kermit, who's just a green boy, and the young Oscar Tully, who is greener still. And what they did was they made, it says right here, Oscar is his grandson, not great-grandson. Which is fine, that there's this unnamed son. He doesn't have a name and isn't a character. They said, can we just condense those generations, that this non-existent character who's apparently dead already, to make Elmo his son and Oscar his grandson? That's fine, I would do that. But the real change here is it says that Oscar is the heir who will one day succeed to rule Riverrun. And some said that implies that his father is dead already, that Elmo is dead. And he does die during the middle of the war. I'm not sure if that means Elmo Tully is alive or dead, or they could just mention him. I don't think he appears in Season 2. I think they might mention him in dialogue, at least. That is unclear, but the thing they are making clear is in the book version, Kermit was the older one, Oscar was the younger one. In the TV show, it's just Oscar. And I hold out some hope that they'll eventually introduce his younger brother, Kermit, because we know these characters go on to do things when they grow up and are older men in the Regency era and beyond. I think, obviously, Muppets, that if you think about it, Elmo and Kermit remind people so much of Muppets that is blatantly what they're referencing. But Grover is sort of on the fence for, and this is subjective, of, is that a real name or is that a Muppet reference? It's a Muppet reference. And Oscar, again, lots of people are named Oscar. Oscar's a common name, like Oscar Isaac or something, that I think they thought of the four, Grover and Oscar are the more presentable names. But Kermit? Now keep in mind, Kermit's a real name. Elmo's a real name, like a Kermit Roosevelt. 100 years ago, these are more common names. So I'm hoping that eventually there will be two sons. Now, the older one being Oscar and a younger one named Kermit. But they can table that for a while. Years from now, they can come back and say there's a younger son named Kermit and just, swap them between the two of them. Okay, Oscar is the older one. And that did confuse me when we first heard leaks about Oscar will lead a troop of Tully Knights to Harrenhal as envoys in episode 7 to treat with Daemon. And young Oscar will explain, well, my grandfather, he's a green, but he's on his deathbed, so we're going to have to stay neutral for a couple of months until he dies, and not lend you the armies of Riverrun. The personal armies of the Tullys, not the other River Lords. And that he will have this big scene with Daemon. Like, why are they sending the younger brother? I didn't understand. He is the older one, possibly only one now. But I think they'll leave that ambiguous to leave the door open to introduce Kermit in a later season. Maybe, but okay. The young grandson of Grover Tully, Oscar Tully, who's just a green boy. That's what we got. This is fine, these condensations happen, I get that. And the fourth thing is just a slight renaming, which does add some more context to things. Michelle Bernard's brothel madam, and she is a pretty well-known actor. It's Fabian Frankel said she was actually my acting coach. This is like her cameoing. She's a well-known actress. In season 1, she was just credited as brothel madam, though it says her brothel is on the street of Silk. It's a high-end place where nobles and princes go. One of the more expensive, nice brothels. Not one of the styes, filthy, grimy places in the bowels of Flea Bottom. They have given her a name for season 2, Sylvie. Why is that significant? Well, there is a prostitute at a high-end brothel, one of the nicer ones on the street of Silk in Fire and Blood in this time period, named Sylvenna Sand. And Sylvenna Sand and her paramour Essie are involved in the storyline with Gaemon Palehair. So this might not be directly adapting that, but just keep an eye open if they're going to kind of move elements around that later you will see this brothel Madam Sylvie with an analog of Essie. I'm not really sure. Some people suggested maybe Diana will be SC. That doesn't make... No, Diana's working at the Cock Inn, so not at the brothel, so we'll see what happens. And it might not even be their version of Sylvenna Sand. It might be more what you call inspired by... It's an Easter egg of one of the prostitutes at a high-end brothel at the Street of Silk is called Sylvenna or Sylvie, without actually doing that, what that character did in the plot. So it might just be a tip of the hat reference rather than that version of the character. I'm not really sure. But those are the four things that we have. Sylvie is in Sylvenna Sand. We have Oscar Tully is now the younger Tully, that this is going to be the ancestor of Catelyn and Edmure, and by extension, this Oscar Tully is a direct ancestor of the 5 Stark kids from Game of Thrones, just on the female side, because the woman's important too, as Arya says. And Hugh Hammer actually had a wife and sickly daughter that they're rounding out his story. And again, the book doesn't really know that much about his background, so they're rounding it out. And the bigger thing is, oh, cool, you cast Racallio Rindoon, and you cast a trans woman actor in what's a gender-bending role, because that's what Racallio was like in the source material. The only issue I take is, why didn't you call this character Racallio? Why was it renamed to Shirako from the minor character you merged them with? And I wish they'd just say, we thought it rolled off the tongue better, we thought it sounded better, or more iconic. I'd be fine with that, but can you give us a reason?